Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica, and I'm an educator at the Perot Museum of Nature and Science in downtown Dallas. In just a minute, you're going to meet my friend Kristen, who's going to be talking to us today about some really cool animal adaptations. Now, she may ask us a few questions like, what do we observe about an animal? What do we think it might eat? Maybe how it could protect itself. And we want everyone watching with us to participate and answer these questions. If you or your teacher has access to the chat, you can put your answers there. We'd love to hear what you have to say. But if not, that's okay. You can answer just in your own head to yourself. If you have a science journal or an extra piece of paper, you can write down your observations. If there's someone else in the room watching with you, you can discuss with them. We want everyone to be thinking about it today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen so we can get started.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen. Today, we are talking about animals and their adaptations that help them to survive within their habitats. And I brought out a few friends and items to help me. But my first question is, what does an animal need to survive? You might have said food, water, shelter, air to breathe, sunlight, protection, any of those things. And animals are able to find all of those things within their habitat or that area where they live or their home. And these adaptations can be structural or physical things about their body, or it can be a behavior, an action, or something that an animal does that can help them to survive. So let's start with, again, I think I'm gonna start with Ms. Jessica's favorite. Let's start with Ms. Jessica's favorite, our owl. This is a great horned owl. What I'm gonna do is I'll set him up here. I want you to make some observations about the great horned owl. What do you think an owl eats? Where might an owl live? How does an owl hunt? Or if you see anything on the body of the owl that you would like to, that you see and observe, please put that in the chat or talk to your buddies. And I'll give you a minute for this. I'm just going to turn the owl around so you can see the back. Some of the things you might have noticed are the large eyes or these little feathers up here sticking up. This is where it gets its name, the great horned owl. You may think they're ears. You may have noticed the feathers or the colors of the feathers. You may have even seen his feet down here and thought, those are some sharp claws. So let's talk about our owl and how all of these physical and structural adaptations come together to help them to survive. So owls are nocturnal. This means that they are awake at night and sleep during the day. So at night, they need to have almost like night vision. They need to be able to see really well at night. And they have a great sense of sight, and that is due to these large eyes that they have. Those large eyes are actually bell-shaped, and it allows more photoreceptors at the back, which means that they have great eyesight, and those big eyes allow more light in. Another thing that helps them at night is their ears. I mentioned these little feathers up here and how you might think their ears are located underneath, but they're not. They actually have asymmetrical ears. So that means that our ears are symmetrical. So they're on the same spot on each side of our head, but owls have one that's raised higher than the other. And that means that one ear can hear up and around, and the other ear can hear down and around. And this helps them because when they're hunting at night, they're actually sitting on a branch, and they just kind of perch there and sit and wait and wait and wait, and they're listening to their surroundings, and they're watching with those big eyes, and they're trying to catch their prey and sneak up on it. So what they do, again, they sit and just listen and watch, and whenever they find something, they swoop down, grab it with their sharp talons, and then bring it right back up into the trees where they feel safe enough to eat. So these owls are carnivores. They are going to eat things like, let's see, chipmunks. They might eat frogs or snakes, little lizards, little tiny rodents like mice scurrying around on the floor of the forest. So a lot of the adaptations are to help them eat. Now, they do breathe oxygen from the air through that beak. They have nostrils on it, but they do not have a good sense of smell. So one of their favorite foods might even be pretty stinky, like a skunk, because they can't smell it. They don't know it smells bad. Why not eat it? Let's see. Let's get a better look at these feet that they have. Let me switch my camera. We look at their feet. So this is the foot of a great horned owl. And what we can see is that they have 3 digits that come forward and 1 digit that comes back. And this is going to help them to, one, hold on to the trees whenever they're sitting and waiting, hunting, right? They're trying to sneak up on their prey, so they want to be silent and sturdy and stable in those trees, so they're just going to sit there. But also, these sharp talons are also going to help them to grab onto their prey whenever they swoop down and just catch it really quick with those feet and then bring it back up into the trees. So it's multi-purpose here, one to make them stable in the trees and the other to catch their prey. Another thing we'll look at while we're right here is the skull of our owl. So I said that those eyes look pretty large, and if we look at the skull, the size of the eyes, it's almost like the whole side of the skull, which is really cool. And then the other thing we can look at on their skull is their beak shape. I'm not sure you could really see it in the big view, but the shape of their beak is partly why I know that this is a carnivore, because if we look at the shape, this curvature that's right here, this is what's going to help the owl pull the meat from the bones and the fur and everything off of the prey that they catch. Now, they can't digest all of that, so sometimes they might eat bones or fur, and those things are really hard for an owl to digest, and it's really heavy in their stomachs. So what happens is they kind of, their bodies push all of that stuff together, and then they spit it up as an owl pellet. So all of that heavy, indigestible material comes out as a pellet, and then all of the good stuff that they can pull nutrients from actually goes through the rest of their body. And that's something that makes them lighter, so they're not carrying around all of that hard to digest material. And it's quicker for them to fly after they eat if they don't do that. So let's see. How do you think an owl protects itself? And owls are usually one of the top predators within their environment. So I'm not just talking about from predators, but what about while they're sleeping? I said that they were nocturnal, so they're awake at night and they sleep during the day, but other animals are awake during the day. So they need to still protect themselves when they're sleeping. One of the ways they can do that is through camouflage. Camouflage is a way of blending in or hiding within your surroundings. So the color pattern of these feathers is to help them camouflage with the trees around them. Now, the feathers are actually good for a couple of things, including flight. The feathers will also keep them warm in the winter and helps them glide through the air whenever they're flying. But they're also good to camouflage in their environment. Another adaptation they have for flight to get away, if they need to protect themselves that way, is nice hollow bones within their bodies, and that it makes them really light, so that way they can fly. I know this owl looks pretty large, but overall, the average size of a great horned owl is only about 2.5 to 3.5 pounds. So they're pretty light in comparison to what they look like, which is really cool and fascinating to me. Let's see. Another thing you may know about an owl is that they can turn their heads all the way around, which they can't turn their heads all the way around. So let's look at a human. I can only turn my head about 180 degrees. So that means I can look this shoulder and I can look over this shoulder, but I can't turn my head much farther than that. Owls can turn their heads 270 degrees. So let me switch the view one more time. So if this is our owl looking forward, they can turn their head 270 degrees, which means that they're missing about 90 degrees behind their head, but they can see 270 degrees around them. They need to be able to move their head that far to see their surroundings because they cannot move their eyeballs. Humans, like you and I, we can move our eyes around without moving our heads. But owls cannot do that. So they have adaptations that allow them to move their whole head. And in our necks, we only have about 7 bones in this part of our body, 7 vertebrae. But owls end up having up to 14 bones in their neck. And they have extra muscles and blood vessels that help them so that they can turn their head and so blood doesn't get cut off to their brain. That's really important. So I'm not really sure if Ms. Jessica mentioned this, but I want to, if you have questions in the chat, I just want to reiterate that we will come back to our questions. So if you have them, just put them in there and we will answer them at the end. Ms. Jessica, did I catch all your favorite facts about the owl?
I think so. I'm excited for our next one.
Okay. I'm going to switch it up. Let's do our possum. So this is our possum. So again, the same questions as earlier. What do you observe about the possum? It could be something that you see now or that you're noticing now. It could be something that you already think you know. But what do you observe and how does it help them to survive? So does it help them protect themselves? Does it help them to eat or hunt? What do they eat? Just a few questions for thought while I'm getting a few things out.
And I observe that he's really cute.
It is super cute, isn't it?
I don't know if that helps it survive, but it's very cute. That's my observation.
Okay, I agree with Miss Jessica's observation that possums are just so cute. I love them, they're adorable. But some of the things that I noticed about their body was this cute little pink nose, and it's got whiskers around it. Let's see. I noticed their hands or their paws. I don't know exactly what the right terminology is for this. Their fur, he's really fuzzy. And their tail. You may not be able to see it, but there is some fur on the tail. Just not nearly as much as the rest of the body. So living here in Dallas, I have seen possums occasionally within our urban environment, which is pretty cool. And they do live really all over the place, except for it can't be too cold for possums, because, you know, their fur, they do have fur, but it's not enough to keep them warm if it was, you know, snowing constantly. So if we take a look at their fur, we can see that it's long, pretty thick. The color changes from white at the base and then it moves into a darker color. And that may help with some camouflage. I don't think they're going to be as well hidden as the owl or something like a beaver or something like that. But, you know, it might help them a little bit. They have other ways of protecting themselves, though. So let's see. Let's go back to this cutie. Let's see. Possums are marsupials, which means that they have a pouch, kind of like a kangaroo. And whenever they have babies, they're alive, but they're only about the size of a honeybee. And those live possums then go into the pouch on the belly for about 3 months. They'll spend 3 months inside the pouch. After that, they move to the back of the mom, and they will hold onto the mom's back for another 2 weeks. And only after all that time will they start to move around on their own. And something that I think increases the cuteness factor is the little sneezy noises that the babies will make whenever they get lost. So when they start wandering or moving on their own, if they can't find their mom, they'll make cute little sneezy noises, and that's how the mom will be able to locate them. I think it just adds to the cuteness. Let's look at their tail. So when I've seen possums here in the urban area, I've seen them on my fence, and I have one of those tall wooden fences. So they'll climb up to the top, and my dog is usually the one to find them. But they'll use this tail to help them climb up things and to sturdy themselves. So whenever my dog is barking at them and kind of catches them off guard, they might use their tail to hold onto the fence a little bit and keep themselves sturdy. And it's called a prehensile tail. So they use it as like a fifth limb. When they're young, possums will use this tail, and they can hang upside down from trees. But once they become an adult, once they hit a certain amount of weight, the tail is no longer strong enough to hold up the entire body. So if you do see a possum hanging upside down from the trees solely from its tail, it has to be pretty young or a juvenile in order to do that. The other thing I want to talk about are their hands. I think you get a pretty good view here, but I want to switch it. We can look at their hands here. So this is the front. You can see that they have 5 digits. I think it also kind of looks like a hand. I don't know, it might just be me. This is the back foot. It really looks like a hand to me there. And the way that the shape of their hands are is going to help them to climb up in trees and on the fences and maneuver around their environment. And that may help them escape from some predators if they can climb. Their predators might be things like bobcats or coyotes, even wolves maybe. If it's a juvenile, a young possum, then birds of prey like hawks and owls might want them for a snack as well. So those are possible predators. Now, what do you think the possum eats? Do you think that possums are carnivores or meat eaters, herbivores or plant eaters, or omnivores? They eat both plants and meat. Possums, let's look at their teeth. They do have some sharp canines, which we see in things like bobcats and coyotes, which are carnivores. So that might indicate a carnivore. But they also have these back molars, they have little points to them. But if I look at this and there's the shape of their teeth, I'm going to assume that possums are omnivores. So they have about 50 teeth within their skull, within their mouth, and they'll use these canines to tear into things like maybe small rodents or frogs or amphibians or something like that. But they'll also use these back molars for chewing, almost like humans do, like nuts and berries and seeds. They'll even get into trash whenever we find them here in the city. And they're actually able to use that cute little nose of theirs. They have a really great sense of smell in this long snout of theirs, and it helps them to locate where their food is. So they'll use that sense of smell to find their food. So we have an omnivore here. We can also see on their skull, their eyes would be about right here in this little indent right there. And then they have this nice crest up here, and muscles are going to attach to that crest and attach down to their jaw. And then their brain would go in this little section right back here. And the brainstem would come out. Now, I mentioned earlier, I don't think the possum would win any awards for camouflaging with their environment to protect themselves, but they have a different adaptation. So camouflage would be almost like a physical adaptation, something structural about their body that helps them to protect themselves. But this next adaptation is a behavioral adaptation. It's an action. It's something that the possum does that they think helps protect themselves. And you may have heard it. It's called playing possum, and it's an involuntary response of their bodies. So it's something that they cannot control, but when they do feel threatened, they will play dead. And what happens is their brain triggers a response to slow down their breathing and slow down their heart rate. And their hope is that the predator that is after them or the threat will no longer be interested in them if they appear dead. They're thinking that if it is a predator or whatever threatened them, that they're going to want them alive. And so they play dead, hoping that the threat will pass, and then they can move along and go about the tasks that they were doing. Now, the ones that I've found in my backyard or that my dog finds, what they've done before is they stand their ground. They kind of fluff up their fur a little bit, and they bare their teeth and make noises towards my dog. So clearly my dog does not threaten them enough for them to play dead, which is okay. My dog's not that scary. But I think I got everything on the possum. So I'm going to move on to our next animal, and it is my absolute favorite. I know you probably thought the possum was my favorite because he's just so cute. And I feel like I said that a lot, but my actual favorite is the frog. Now, I'm going to bring these out for observations, but if you still had questions about the possum or the owl, again, put them in the chat. We'll answer them later. So just take a look at, this is a bullfrog, an American bullfrog, and this is a Woodhouse's toad. So we have a frog and a toad, and you can make some observations about them. Remember, think about where they live and what they might eat. Are they predators, or who preys on them? Okay, so if we look at the frog, some of the things I noticed are the eyes. I noticed the really long legs here at the back. I also noticed the webbed feet. And the last thing I noticed is, well, you don't notice it, but something that I know about frogs is that long, sticky tongue. So let's start with what they eat and how. Frogs are technically a carnivore. They eat insects, but insects are meat, so that makes them an insectivore or a carnivore. So that long, sticky tongue is going to help them reach out and grab the insects and pull it back into their mouth. But that's not the only adaptation they have for eating. What they'll do is they will actually use their eyes to help them swallow their food. And what happens is they close their eyelids and they push their eyes or drop their eyes into their bodies, and that will then push the food down their throat. And you can catch it if you can catch it in slow motion, it's really cool to watch, but you can actually see them close their eyes and push their eyes down into their mouths. It's really cool. So yes, they have that long sticky tongue and saliva, but they also use their eyes to help them swallow it. Let's see. Bullfrogs can get pretty big. They can get up to about 1 pound and up to 18 inches. So they might eat things other than insects, but they are going to be strictly carnivores. Who do you think would prey on a bullfrog? Who do you think some of its predators are? And how do you think the frog gets away from those predators? How do you think he protects himself? So some of the predators of frogs and bullfrogs might be things like possums and raccoons, or owls and other birds of prey like hawks. Really just depends on what ecosystem or habitat the frog is within. So one way they can protect themselves is through camouflage. If you look at the color of the frog, he's going to blend in really well with like some green colors and maybe some mud along rivers and streams and lakes where it lives. But the other defense that it has are these really long legs back here. And if we look at the skeleton of our frog, we can see that the legs are pretty long, and we've got these nice solid bones in there, and the feet also have bones that go within them. And this helps them to jump or hop away from their prey or from their predators. So when they feel threatened, they might jump or hop away. Now, if we look at the skeleton of a toad, their legs are actually much shorter. So they're not going to be able to hop away quite as well as a frog would. But they have another way of defending themselves. They too can camouflage with their surroundings. But what they'll do instead is they also secrete poison. So if you can see this little circle right behind the eye of this Woodhouse's toad, that's a gland that secretes poison. Other side. That's a gland that secretes poison. And with this poison, they're hoping that if they're in the mouth of, say, I don't know, a coyote or a bobcat, something picks them up, the poison from these glands will taste really bitter and bad, and that coyote or bobcat might drop them. So that's another defense that toads have. They have webbed feet to help them keep from sinking in the mud. Frogs and toads are amphibians, which means they're going to live part of their life in the water and part of their life out of the water. So they really need to be able to handle both of those things. Frogs are going to be found really close to the water because they exchange oxygen through their skin. Toads, their skin is a little bit thicker and bumpier, and they can hold on to that water a little bit better than frogs can. So they can be a little bit farther from the water source. But frogs will be really close, if not within the water. I think I got all my favorites about the frog and the toad. Are we still good on time, Miss Jessica?
We are, and I am super excited about this next one.
Okay, so we'll move on to probably our last animal. This is our Western Diamondback rattlesnake. So what I want you to do, like all the other ones, make some observations. What do you see? How do you think that's beneficial for the animal? How are they getting food and water and shelter? How are they protecting themselves? So when I see this snake, I immediately see scales and the pattern on their skin. I notice the really scary looking fangs and teeth. And I also notice the rattle. So let's talk about all of these things and how they come together to help the animal survive. Where to start? Let's start with the scales and the pattern. This is going to help the snake protect itself. The pattern will help it camouflage with its environment in the rocky terrain and even in the shade between the rocks. Snakes are ectotherms, which means they need heat from the sunlight to warm their body or go into the shade to cool themselves down. They can't regulate their body temperature internally like we can. These scales, they're going to shed, like humans shed our skin, but we do it all the time, little by little. Snakes shed their skin every once in a while, but everything from head to tail gets shed at the same time. And a lot of factors affect how often they shed, so how dry the environment is or how big they are, really a lot of things. So you can see that here, even the scale or the shed above their eyes is shed. And this is probably from a python. We can see the top scales of the body, and we can see the belly scales. And snakes move in a wave-like motion from head to tail, and these belly scales will push off of the irregular surfaces on the ground, and that's how they'll move. But with a rattlesnake, the very tip of their tail, the very tip, is not actually shed off their body. It instead becomes one of these little lobes of the rattle. And so they shed everything except the very tip, and it becomes part of the rattle. The rattle is really cool because of the behavior that they do with it. So they shake this rattle, and this rattle can move up to 60 times per second. And it's meant as a warning for other animals and humans even to alert them that the rattlesnake is there. So I think rattlesnakes get a really mean reputation, which is fair. They do bite humans from time to time, and they are venomous, which is really scary. But they're not seeking humans out. What happens is that snakes camouflage with their surroundings so well that they also have this rattle. And what happens is, say I'm, hiking down the trail and I don't see the rattlesnake, but I hear it. I may hear the rattlesnake before I see it. And the snakes rattle because they are threatened by me. I am much larger than a snake. They feel threatened. I have invaded their personal bubble, their territory, and they no longer feel safe. So what they do is they rattle. When I hear that rattle, I should instinctively know that it's a rattlesnake, yes, but I don't just want to run away. I actually want to pause, listen, try to figure out which direction the rattle is coming from, and then go in the opposite direction. I know it's kind of like you get really scared whenever you hear it and you want to just run away, but the last thing you want to do is run into it on accident. So you actually need to pause, listen, try to figure out where it's coming from, and then go in the opposite direction of the snake. But it's actually a pretty friendly warning for us. And it's just because they camouflage so well and they feel threatened by us that they rattle. And it's pretty nice. Most snakes won't chase after you if you leave them alone. It's only whenever you don't leave them alone that they can become pretty mean. So let's move on to how a snake eats. So we see these nice fangs. This is a venomous snake. So they have two fangs that are retractable. Non-venomous snakes will also have teeth, but they'll have more of them. But what I noticed that's similar between a rattlesnake or a venomous snake and a non-venomous snake is the shape of the teeth. They're both kind of curved. They have that curved shape to them. And what happens is if an animal is still alive while they're trying to swallow it whole, and that animal does try to escape, that animal will actually get stuck on these teeth that are pointed back into their mouth. So if here's the tooth, here's the tip of it, and this is an animal and they're trying to escape, they'll actually get punctured by those teeth again and they won't be able to. So it's an adaptation that helps keep the food inside their mouth. For a venomous snake, those fangs have venom within them. And venom is toxic to humans, it's harmful. And if you go to the hospital, they have antivenom to help you recover from a snake bite if it is venomous. You just have to kind of keep an eye on what kind of snake it is. And that's really helpful to them. So you can see here in the skull, there are actually more than just two fangs. There's actually 3 here and 3 here. And what happens is sometimes those fangs can fall out and the snakes will drop a new one. So they'll replace those fangs every once in a while. Let's see, we talked about camouflage, we talked about what they eat, how they eat, we talked about a rattle. I think the last thing I want to talk about is venom versus poison, because I mentioned both in this broadcast, so I want to talk about the difference. So I said that toads secrete poison from those glands. Poison and venom can both be harmful to humans, but it's all about how it's introduced into our body. So poison from toads or poison dart frogs or poison ivy is something that we absorb through our skin. But poison can also be something that you eat. So poison comes through our skin or we ingest it. Venom, on the other hand, from things like a snake, that is injected into our body. So those fangs break the skin and then the venom is dispersed throughout our bloodstream or our muscles. And it's all about the difference between how it gets into our body. But they can both be harmful to humans. And then the last thing I always get questions about, I know I said venom and poison was the last thing, but I want to do one more thing because I know someone may have this question out there. Do snakes have bones? They kind of look like worms and worms don't have bones. So do snakes have bones? Let's see. Snakes do have bones. They have a skeleton and they have a backbone, just like we do, with the vertebrae all the way down. And then we have ribs that protect our lungs, and they have kind of like modified ribs that go all the way, almost all the way down their bodies. And that helps to protect the sides of the snake. How are we doing on time, Miss Jessica?
We are just about out of time, which is okay because I think we've gone over all the animals now. And I have to say that I have learned so much today, and I hope that everyone watching has too. And I know we weren't able to necessarily hear or see all of your questions today, so we encourage you at home to definitely look up the answers because there's new things to learn about these animals all the time. We love how curious you are in coming up with your questions. And even scientists themselves are still learning a lot. So definitely look up those answers.
I highly encourage it, just like Miss Jessica does. Some questions I was asked yesterday, I went and looked up today, and I was able to tell you a little bit more information about the animals. So I'm still looking up things, and I really encourage you all to do that as well. You will, I'm sure, think the possum is as cute as Miss Jessica and I do once you look them up. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and happy Friday. Bye.
Happy Friday.